Keep the dog away from him, the teacher snapped, jabbing her finger toward the boy sagging in the wheelchair. He doesn't register anything. He's basically furniture. Don't let the animal near that mess. Those 17 words struck me with more force than a fist ever could. I stood frozen in the doorway of the 4th grade classroom, gripping the worn leather leash attached to my golden retriever, Chester. Chester, a certified therapy dog whose heart was bigger than his entire body, swept his tail across the floor, completely unaware that the woman in the knit cardigan had just stripped the humanity from a 10-year-old child. "I'm James," I said, forcing my voice to stay level, even though my blood was already simmering. "I'm the new one-on-one aide, and this is Chester." Mrs. Pruitt, the lead teacher, didn't bother raising her eyes from her stack of papers. She flicked a dismissive hand toward the back of the room. "Whatever, just keep the dog contained. State testing is around the corner, and the actual students need to concentrate. Noah sits back there. If he makes any noise, roll him out into the hallway. If he needs changing, try calling custodial, but don't count on anyone showing up before noon." I turned my gaze to Noah. He was buckled into an intricate molded wheelchair, his head listing to the right. His limbs were rigid, locked in the kind of spasticity that comes with severe cerebral palsy. His eyes were aimed at a bare stretch of drywall. No books, no screen, no pictures. Just him and the beige paint. "Furniture," I murmured under my breath. I guided Chester toward the corner. The rest of the class, 20 animated, talkative 10-year-olds, tracked us with open curiosity, but they clearly understood the unspoken rule. The boy in the back doesn't count. He's not one of us. "Hey, Noah," I said gently, dropping to a knee beside his chair. "I'm James, and this big lovable clown is Chester." Noah didn't shift. His gaze stayed bolted to the wall. A thin line of drool gathered at the edge of his lip. I dabbed it away with a tissue. Mrs. Pruitt let out a dismissive noise from her desk. "Save your energy. He's not home. The lights are on, but there's nobody inside." I felt Chester's wet nose bump my elbow. A soft, low whimper escaped him. I looked down at the dog. He wasn't watching the boisterous kids snapping Legos together. He wasn't interested in the teacher. His entire focus was locked on Noah. "Go say hello, boy," I whispered, letting the leash go slack. Chester didn't leap. He didn't make a sound. He moved with a solemn, heavy grace. He padded straight to the wheelchair and with painstaking slowness laid his broad, golden head across Noah's withered legs. He released a deep, shuddering sigh, his fur pressing into the boy's stiff hands. And then I caught it. It was barely there. If you weren't searching for it, it would have slipped past you entirely. Noah's pinky twitched, then his index finger. His hand, the one Mrs. Pruitt had written off as a useless claw, started to unfold. Shaking with enormous effort, Noah inched his fingers downward until they disappeared into Chester's soft coat. Noah turned his head. It cost him 10 agonizing seconds of strained movement, but he turned. He gazed down at the dog. Then he lifted his eyes to mine. Those eyes were not vacant. They were screaming. They were sharp, desperate, and drowning in a loneliness so deep it nearly shattered me. "He's drawn to him," I said out loud. "Involuntary reflexes," Mrs. Pruitt called back without turning around. "Muscle spasms." The day marched on, a masterclass in exclusion. When the class filed to the library for story hour, Mrs. Pruitt instructed me to leave Noah behind because the wheelchair crowds the carpet area. I pretended not to hear. I wheeled Noah straight to the center of the circle, Chester stretching out across his feet like a golden anchor. When a few kids grumbled about the blocked view, I told them to scoot over. "Noah is listening," I told the class. "He can't follow the story," a girl with pigtails announced. There was no malice in her voice. She was only echoing what every adult in the room had taught her. Watch, I said. I pulled out my own tablet. I'd preloaded a basic communication app before I set foot in this school, something the district hadn't bothered to provide Noah in 3 full years. The screen displayed 4 large colored squares. Noah, I said, and my voice wavered just slightly. The main character in the book is wearing a red hat. Can you show Chester the color red? The room fell silent. Mrs. Pruitt hovered near the doorway, arms knotted across her chest, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth, waiting for me to crash, waiting for the furniture to sit still. Noah's breathing turned heavy. His arm trembled violently. The motion wasn't fluid. It was a war against his own nervous system. Chester sensed the strain. He rose and dragged his tongue across Noah's cheek, a wet, sloppy encouragement. Noah's hand flew out. He didn't just graze the screen, he drove his knuckles into it. A robotic voice from the tablet declared, "Red." The girl with pigtails sucked in a breath. He actually did it! Random chance, Mrs. Pruitt muttered, though her smirk had cracked. One more, I said, my heart slamming against my ribs. Noah, Chester is golden, like yellow. Show us yellow. Noah didn't pause this time. He dragged his hand across the tray and struck the yellow square. Yellow. The library erupted. The kids who had ignored him for years surged toward the wheelchair. Noah, try blue! Noah, check out this picture! Noah, touch the dog! For the first time in his life, Noah wasn't furniture. He was the captain of the ship, and Chester was his first mate. I watched a smile, a real, lopsided, gorgeous smile, split across Noah's face. He let out a raw, guttural sound, a joyful yelp that sounded like laughter trapped inside a broken speaker. Chester barked back, a bright, affirming bark. The rest of the day was an uprising. I refused to stay in the back. I positioned Noah at the front. I had the other students take turns reading to him. I made the custodian meet Noah's eyes when he came to assist with the restroom break. By 3 in the afternoon, Noah was spent, but he was radiant. When the final bell rang and the classroom emptied, I was loading up the tablet when Mrs. Pruitt walked over. She looked drained, her defensive walls scrambling to rebuild. Listen, James, she began, her voice lower, stripped of its usual edge. You've got a talent for this, and the dog is sweet. But don't set yourself up for heartbreak. Today was a fluke. Parents like Noah's, they latch on to false hope. It's unkind to let them believe he's capable of more than he actually is. He functions at the level of an infant. The humane thing is to keep him comfortable. I fastened the leash to Chester's collar. I studied this woman, a seasoned educator who had allowed her heart to calcify until she could look at a child and see an object. Mrs. Pruitt, I said, running my hand along Chester's head, you look at a broken body. My dog sees a human being. Chester walked past 20 typical kids to sit with Noah. Dogs don't carry agendas. They don't worry about budgets or standardized test scores. They simply know who needs love, and they know who has love to give. I moved toward the door, then stopped. And he's not an infant. He's 10. He understands that you think he's stupid. He understands you think he's furniture. Picture being imprisoned inside a body that refuses to cooperate, surrounded by people who discuss you as if you don't exist. If you had witnessed what I witnessed today, if you had seen the person alive inside that chair, this classroom would look nothing like this, and neither would you. I pushed through the door into the crisp autumn air, leaving her standing in the silence of her vacant room. I walked toward the parking lot with trembling hands. I wasn't merely angry. I was mourning. A modified van rolled up to the curb, the rigid timetable of the special transit service. The driver gave me a nod. I pulled open the side door. Inside, secured in the back seat, sat a boy. He looked almost identical to Noah. Same wheelchair, same tilting head, same eyes that fought to focus but held a galaxy of unspoken thoughts. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, my voice fracturing. I unclipped Chester. The dog launched himself into the van, wedging into the space beside the boy, frantically covering his face with kisses. The boy let out that same raw, joyful noise I'd heard ring through the library. "Hi, Dylan," I said to my son. "Dad's here." I'm not a teacher by training. I was a corporate accountant until 5 years ago. I walked away when I understood that the school system viewed my son as a number, a liability, a piece of furniture. I became an aide and I trained Chester for a single purpose: to infiltrate the system, to become the person for someone else's child that I prayed someone would be for mine. As I steered toward home, stealing glances in the rearview mirror at Chester, resting his head on my son's chest, I thought about Noah. I thought about the thousands of Noahs and Dylans parked in the back corners of classrooms across this country, facing blank walls, waiting for someone to acknowledge they are alive. We inhabit a world that worships intelligence and physical perfection. But today, a dog taught a classroom full of human beings a lesson no textbook will ever contain. A voice doesn't always require words to be heard, and a soul doesn't need a cooperative body to be whole. If a dog can recognize the person hidden behind the disability, why is it so difficult for the rest of us? Be the one who sees the person, not the chair. Be the one who brings the dog. Be the one who shatters the silence. Because they are in there. And they are waiting for us. The morning after Chester made Noah speak in colors, my phone vibrated with a message that felt like a hand shoving him back into the dark. "Report to the main office immediately. Do not bring the dog." No greeting, no interest. No, "how did you pull that off?" Just a directive. Chester waited by the front door the way he always did when I clipped on my badge. Tail sweeping the tiles, eyes gleaming, ready to work. I grabbed his leash anyway. "Not today, boy," I whispered. He pressed his head into my thigh, bewildered, like he couldn't fathom why humans always wait for something beautiful to happen, then punish it. Dylan was in the living room, secured in his chair, mesmerized by the ceiling fan spinning as if it were whispering secrets he couldn't relay. I kissed his forehead. "I'll be back," I told him, the way I told him every single day. But my gut didn't buy it, because I'd witnessed what happens when a system decides someone isn't worth the hassle. And systems don't apologize. They just process you. The front office of Ridgeview Elementary smelled like laminated paper and dread. The receptionist offered me the sort of smile people deploy when they're about to deliver bad news, but want credit for being gentle about it. "James, they're ready for you." The principal, Mr. Calloway, didn't offer me a seat. He pointed at a chair the way you direct a package to a corner. On his desk sat a folder. Thick. My last name printed on the tab. Across from him sat Mrs. Pruitt, cardigan and all, arms barricaded across her chest like she was defending a property line. Beside her was a woman I'd never encountered. Tidy hair, clenched jaw, a clipboard stamped with a district seal I'd never had reason to trust. "Mr. Crawford," Mr. Calloway said, lacing his fingers together. "This is Dr. Marsh. She's with Student Services." Student Services. That term always sounds like help until you discover it means enforcement. "Why am I here?" I asked. Mrs. Pruitt exhaled like she'd been holding it in for hours. "Because you turned my classroom into a sideshow." I held her gaze. "A child engaged with a communication device," I said. "Students included him." He smiled. Dr. Marsh didn't blink. "We've received a number of concerns." "From whom?" "Parents," Mr. Calloway answered quickly. "One child has allergies. Another is frightened of dogs. Several reported their children came home distracted and unsettled. Unsettled that a disabled kid exists? The words left me sharper than I intended. Mr. Calloway's eyes dropped, like he didn't want that sentence anywhere near the record. Nobody phrased it that way, Dr. Marsh replied, clinical as a ledger. But we are obligated to ensure an appropriate learning environment for all students. I laughed once, not because it was humorous, because it was rehearsed. All students, I repeated. Except Noah. Mrs. Pruitt leaned forward. Noah is medically fragile. The dog is a sanitation risk. The tablet isn't authorized. And you overrode my classroom management in front of the entire class. Overrode. That's what they call it when you decline to participate in cruelty. He's not a hazard, I said. He's a child, and the tablet isn't district approved, Dr. Marsh interrupted, which opens us to liability. If the device malfunctions, if a student gets hurt, if it records, it doesn't record. You claim it doesn't, she said. We can't operate on sentiment, Mr. Crawford. There it was. Sentiment. The label a system slaps on empathy when it wants to brush it aside. Mr. Calloway slid a document across the desk. Until we've reviewed the situation, he said, you'll be reassigned to non-student duties. I looked down at the sheet. Temporary reassignment. No classroom, no Noah, no Chester. Just hallway monitoring and copy room shifts. The quiet graveyard where good intentions are buried. You're pulling me away from him, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We're removing you from the disruption, Mrs. Pruitt corrected, satisfaction flickering across her face. I slid the paper back. No, I said, you're stripping him of the first day he's ever been treated like a human being. Mr. Calloway's cheeks reddened. This isn't personal. It's always personal, I said. It just doesn't register that way when the person suffering is always the same kind of person. Dr. Marsh's pen hovered. Are you alleging discrimination? I refused to hand her a legal term. I gave her a human one. I'm alleging cowardice, I said, because it's simpler to manage a corner than a conscience. Mrs. Pruitt's jaw tightened. You have no idea what it's like having 20 students who depend on you. I rose to my feet. You're right, I said. I don't. Then I paused, and my voice dropped lower. I understand what it's like to have one child the world keeps trying to erase. That finally made Mr. Calloway look up. What do you mean? I swallowed. My son, I said. Dylan. He's like Noah. The temperature in the room shifted. Not warmer, just more cautious. Like they just realized the aide standing before them was also a father with absolutely nothing left to lose. They let me leave with my badge still pinned to my chest, but it felt heavier now, like a weight that whispered, "Follow the rules, or you'll be punished for caring." I didn't report to the copy room. I walked straight to Noah's classroom. I didn't knock. Mrs. Pruitt stiffened when she spotted me, like I was an infection. Noah sat exactly where he always sat. Back corner, facing the wall. No tablet. No circle of kids. No Chester. Just beige paint and silence, as if yesterday had been a dream someone had already filed under inappropriate. My chest went hot. I crossed the room and knelt beside him. "Hey, Noah," I whispered. "I'm here." His eyes drifted toward me, slow, agonizing effort. And I saw it. The gulf between a child who had been seen and a child who had been shelved again. His breathing was faster. His jaw clenched. His fingers, Those fingers that had found yellow without a moment's doubt were balled tight, like he was clutching something invisible so it couldn't be ripped from him again. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small strip of soft fabric, one of Chester's spare bandanas. I had cut a piece off the night before, like a thief smuggling hope ahead of schedule. I placed it gently into Noah's palm. His fingers quivered. Then, slowly, they closed around it. Not a spasm. A decision. Mrs. Pruitt cleared her throat like a gunshot. "You're not assigned to this room," she said. "I'm assigned to being decent," I replied without looking up. She pointed at the door. "Out." I stood carefully, like I was leaving a hospital bedside. Noah made a sound, low, strained, desperate. It wasn't a word, but it landed in my body like one. "Don't go." I bent close. "I'm not finished," I whispered. "I promise you, I'm not finished." The phone call arrived at 11:17 in the morning, an unfamiliar number. When I picked up, a woman's voice fractured before she even managed hello. "Is this James?" she asked. "Yes." "This is Sophia," she said, "Noah's mother." I closed my eyes. Of course the system had my contact information now. Not to express gratitude. To contain me. "I heard what happened yesterday," she said. "My neighbor's daughter is in that class. She told me she said Noah picked colors." Heard. Not the school informed me. Not the teacher reached out. A 10-year-old had delivered the news the adults withheld. My throat constricted. "Yes," I said. "He did." She inhaled sharply, like her lungs had been holding their breath for years. "They keep insisting he can't," she said. "They keep insisting I'm imagining things, that he's—" She didn't finish the word, but I'd heard it in different voices. Furniture. Vegetable. Burden. I kept my voice steady. "Come in," I said. "Today, if you can, request a meeting." A pause. "A meeting?" she whispered. "They never listen to me." "I know," I said. Then I added, gently, "They'll listen when there are witnesses." I despised that it was the truth, but pretending otherwise wouldn't save her son. By 1:30, we were seated in a conference room with a long table that looked like it had hosted 1,000 conversations where absolutely nothing changed. Mr. Calloway sat at the head. Dr. Marsh perched beside him, pen ready to record whatever shielded the district best. Mrs. Pruitt arrived last, carrying her indignation like a handbag. And Sophia walked in, clutching a folder so thick it could have propped open a door. She looked exhausted in a way I recognized instantly. Not tired. Erased. Her hair was scraped back too tightly, as though she didn't trust herself to have a single strand out of place. Her hands trembled when she set the folder down. "I want to know," she said, voice shaking but razor-edged, "why my son has been parked in the corner for 3 years." Silence. Mr. Calloway cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reyes." "It's Ms. Reyes," she corrected. Mrs. Pruitt rolled her eyes so subtly she probably assumed nobody caught it. But I caught it. And Sophia caught it. And Noah had been catching it for years. Dr. Marsh spoke in her polished professional tone. "Noah's placement reflects what the team determined was appropriate based on his needs." "My son needs communication," Sophia said, and her voice climbed. "He needs to be included. He needs someone to speak to him like he's present." Mrs. Pruitt sighed. "He can't access grade-level material." Sophia's head snapped toward her. "I didn't ask for grade level," she said. "I asked for dignity." That sentence straightened something inside me, because it wasn't a plea. It was an indictment. Mr. Calloway leaned in. Yesterday's events stirred up a great deal of emotion. Sophia let out a single bitter laugh. Yes, God forbid anyone feels anything inside a building full of children. Dr. Marsh tapped her pen. We can't dismiss parent concerns about animals, allergies, disruptions. My son is not a disruption, Sophia said, and now her voice shook with fury. He is not noise. He is not a complication to manage. He is a child. Mrs. Pruitt's expression hardened. We have 20 other children to think about. There it was. The sentence that always executes empathy. We have others. As though one child's humanity is an extravagance. I leaned forward. May I show you something? I asked. Dr. Marsh's eyes narrowed. What exactly? I placed my tablet on the table. Not district issued. Not authorized. But real. I brought this yesterday, I said. Noah used it. Twice. Accurately. In front of the whole class. Mrs. Pruitt scoffed. Coincidence. Sophia's eyes ignited. Then prove it, she said. Right now. Mr. Calloway wavered. Dr. Marsh looked as if she wanted to refuse. Because no is what systems default to when the truth might cost them. But Sophia carried something they hadn't prepared for. A mother with absolutely nothing left to lose. You want to keep telling me he's not in there? She demanded. Then look me in the face and tell me you refuse to even try. Mr. Calloway exhaled, defeated. Bring Noah in, he said quietly. Mrs. Pruitt's lips pressed into a white line. A minute later, they rolled Noah into the room. He entered strapped and tilted, his eyes wide as though he knew precisely what this room meant. Not learning. Judgment. Sophia rushed to him, pressed her lips to his forehead, and then, as if terrified to hope too loudly, she looked at me. I angled the tablet toward Noah. 4 colors. Large. Simple. I softened my voice. Noah, I said. It's James. Remember yesterday? His breathing shifted. Slight, but unmistakable. Can you show us yellow? His arm shook violently. It wasn't elegant. It was combat. Sophia clamped a hand over her mouth, tears already pooling. Mrs. Pruitt glanced away, as though watching was an inconvenience. Noah's hand scraped across the tray. His knuckles crashed down. Yellow. The robotic voice spoke. And Sophia made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, like someone stumbling onto water after years lost in a desert. Dr. Marsh blinked. Once. Twice. Like her brain was scrambling to categorize this under something harmless. That could be... she started. Again! Sophia demanded, voice slicing through tears. Do it again! I didn't want to push him. But Noah's eyes were on fire now. Not blank. Not absent. Burning. I swallowed and shifted the prompt. Noah, I said, show us red. He fought. He shook. He slammed. Red. The room turned to stone. Mr. Calloway stared at the tablet as if it had just confessed something. Mrs. Pruitt's face had drained of color. And Dr. Marsh finally scrawled something that wasn't a liability note. It looked like fear. Because fear is what systems feel when they realize they've been wrong on paper. Sophia stepped closer to the table, voice trembling but lethally calm. "So," she said, "how long have you been warehousing my son in a corner while he was capable of this?" No one answered. Because there is no answer that doesn't sound like what it is. Neglect. The backlash didn't wait for the meeting to finish. It arrived the way it always does, swift, loud, and aimed at the easiest target. By dismissal, parents clustered near the pickup lane, whispering and staring as though I'd dragged a scandal into their orderly routine. A man in a baseball cap marched up to me while I stood beside my car. "You're the dog guy," he said. "I'm James," I replied. He didn't offer his name. "My daughter said your dog was in the room yesterday," he said. "She came home talking about wheelchairs and drool and stuff." His tone wasn't cruel. It was defensive. Like he was trying to shield his kid from reality. "She's 10, I said. "Reality is headed her way whether we prepare her gently or not." He frowned. "I'm not trying to be heartless, but we've got testing, and my kid's already struggling. I'm not paying taxes so class time can become..." He caught himself. But the sentence was already hanging in the air. "Charity." I held his gaze. "What would you want?" I asked softly. "If your child was the one strapped to that chair?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair," he snapped. "Don't guilt trip me." I nodded. "You're right. It isn't fair." Then I said the part that makes people angry because it's honest. "But fairness doesn't mean you never have to witness someone else's pain." He scoffed and turned away. Behind him, a woman approached, arms loaded with grocery bags, eyes worn thin. "My son's in that class," she said quietly. "He told me Noah smiled yesterday. He said it was the first time he'd ever really noticed him." She swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered, as if saying it too loud might get her flagged. And right there, that parking lot contained the entire country in miniature. One parent terrified their child might lose an edge. Another parent realizing their child was becoming someone worth being proud of. Both afraid. Both certain they were right. That evening, after I fed Dylan and guided him through his routine, I sat at the kitchen table with Chester's head in my lap and stared at the wall. Not the way Noah stares. The way someone stares when they're trying not to collapse. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Inclusion sounds beautiful until it costs something. Until it costs time. Until it costs comfort. Until it costs the fantasy that your kid's success is the only thing that matters. And the people who get sacrificed first are always the ones who can't fight back. Kids like Noah. Kids like Dylan. I opened my laptop. Not to expose anyone. Not to name a school. Not to launch a witch hunt. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a mirror. So I wrote a post. No district name, no teacher name. Just a story. About a boy in a wheelchair being labeled furniture. About a dog who refused to accept it. About a classroom that transformed for one day until the adults tried to reverse it because it was inconvenient. I ended with a single question. If your child had been the one in the corner, would you still call it a distraction? Or would you call it a life? I stared at the screen for a long time. Chester sighed. Dylan made a small sound from his chair, soft, unaware, but present. And I hit post. By morning, my phone was an inferno. Messages from strangers. Parents. Teachers. Therapists. People calling me inspiring. People calling me reckless. People warring in comment threads I hadn't even opened. One message read, "Finally, someone says it. Schools treat disabled kids like cargo." Another read. Stop vilifying teachers. You have no clue what they face. Another read, if my kid's education suffers because of one child, that's unacceptable. And then, inevitably, someone wrote, this is why the country is circling the drain. Everybody had a theory. Everybody had a team. And Noah? Noah was still in the corner unless somebody went to war for him. That's the part that made me ill. We love to debate human beings like their policy proposals. We love to turn suffering into a spectator sport in the comments section. But when the phones go dark, the corner is still there. I walked into Ridgeview and felt the atmosphere shift. Teachers muttered behind their hands. Staff dodged my eyes. Mr. Calloway summoned me to his office before I reached the hallway. His face looked 10 years older than yesterday. You posted something, he said. I told a story, I replied. No names, no school. He rubbed his forehead. It's spreading. Dr. Marsh stood by the window as if she wished she could phase through the glass. Mrs. Pruitt wasn't present, but I could feel her fingerprints all over the room. Mr. Calloway exhaled. This puts us in a very difficult position. I didn't put you there, I said. You've been there. I just switched on the lights. Dr. Marsh snapped. You're fanning the flames. I looked at her. No, I said quietly. I'm illuminating them. Mr. Calloway's voice softened. James, people are furious. Good, I said. They stared at me as if I'd come unhinged. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grin. I simply told the truth. Because anger is what happens when comfort gets interrupted by humanity. Silence. Then Mr. Calloway asked, almost begging, what do you want? I thought of Noah's fingers curling around Chester's fabric. I thought of Sophia's tears. I thought of Dylan watching a ceiling fan like it was the only conversation he was permitted. And I said it plainly. I want Noah out of the corner, I said. I want him given tools to communicate. I want him included as though he belongs. And I want the adults in this building to stop discussing him as if he isn't in the room. Dr. Marsh scoffed. And the other students? I held her gaze. Do you hear yourself? I asked softly, as though Noah isn't one of them. Mr. Calloway swallowed. Then, very quietly, he said, we'll schedule an IEP meeting. Sophia had been pleading for that for years. Now it was happening because the internet had its eyes on them. That realization should have felt like a victory. Instead, it made me feel sick. Because why does a child require an audience to deserve dignity? At lunch, I crossed paths with Mrs. Pruitt in the corridor. She halted, eyes frozen. You think you're some savior, she said. I didn't flinch. I think I'm a father, I replied. And I think you got comfortable with a corner. Her nostrils flared. You just made everything more difficult. For whom? I asked. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it, because she knew the answer. More difficult for the adults, not for Noah. The corner was already difficult. More difficult than any test. More difficult than any policy. More difficult than any awkward meeting. I walked past her. And inside my head, I heard the question now alive in every comment thread. Is inclusion worth the price? Here's the part people refuse to confess. If your answer is only when it's painless, then you're not talking about inclusion. You're talking about convenience dressed in good intentions. That afternoon, I returned to Noah's classroom. Not as his assigned aide, not as a compliant employee, as a witness. Mrs. Pruitt attempted to keep him cornered again. But something had shifted. The kids had shifted. A boy from the Lego table raised his hand. "Mrs. Pruitt," he said, voice small but steady. "Why does Noah have to face the wall?" The room froze. That question, simple, innocent, was more explosive than any adult accusation. Because children don't ask it to score points. They ask it because it's wrong. Mrs. Pruitt's lips parted, but no justification sounded acceptable out loud. Another kid spoke up. "Yesterday he picked colors," the girl with pigtails said. "That means he can hear us." And then, like dominoes tipping, more voices. "He's in our class. He loves Chester." He smiled. I stood motionless, pulse pounding. Because this is what a revolution actually looks like. Not a viral post. Not a dramatic monologue. A child posing a question an adult can't answer without sounding cruel. Mrs. Pruitt's eyes darted to me, seething. But she couldn't punish an entire class for recognizing a human being. Not anymore. Not with people watching. Not with the truth wide awake. Slowly, rigidly, she waved her hand. "Fine," she said. "Move him to the side." It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't the corner. And Noah's eyes, those eyes that everyone kept dismissing as empty, locked onto the sound of the children around him like he was drinking in sunlight. That night, my post reached 1 million views. I didn't celebrate. Because Noah wasn't a video. He wasn't content. He wasn't a debate prompt. He was a child who had waited 10 years for someone to say, "You belong here." And now, the entire country was arguing about whether belonging should be earned. So I'm going to put the same question to you that I put in my post, because this is where the story stops being mine and becomes yours. If your child's test score dropped by a single point, but a child like Noah got to be recognized as human for the first time, would you call that a tragedy? Or would you call that a price worth paying? Because somewhere in a beige corner, a kid is still staring at a wall. And whether he stays there depends on what kind of person we choose to be when empathy costs us something.